the most important thing I urge all leaders to do is find those still points, find those places where they can step back. And I will confess, mine is between like 3 and 5 in the morning, because that's when I know I can reliably have that time. But whether it's running or meditating or finding that place where you can actually listen inward, because when we're still, we often know where our strengths are, and we can start to leverage those even more fully.
Family, Dr. Camille Preston is a leading business psychologist, and she's the founder and CEO of AIM Leadership. Now, she's helped leaders from Fortune 500 companies to those from small businesses navigate workplace challenges, optimize systems, and build trust. She's the author of Create More Flow and Rewired. Additionally, she has a new book coming out that I'm hoping she'll talk with us about today. But she's come here to share her insights in fast company and psychology today. We are thrilled to have her. Enjoy. Dr. Camille, I'm so happy to have you here. And I know we've just been talking about babies and stuff before we actually turn this thing on. But it's just really, I shouldn't say but, and it's really thoughtful of you to be interested in like the whole person, the baby, I guess we can kind of start there because your path to becoming a business psychologist includes an incredible variety of roles. Sharing my grandbaby with me just now, but you've also been a limousine driver, a cattle rancher in Texas, a refugee settlement worker in Africa. I'm sure that list could continue. What have you learned from those diverse experiences that shaped you to understanding human, not just human potential, but human behavior, like women who scroll through to find pictures of their grandbabies?
Beautiful babies. Oh, that's fantastic. I'm really, it starts with family. I'm really grateful that my parents were comfortable enough that when I left college, they were okay with me being at large. So, I had graduated a good college and people said, "What is your daughter doing?" And when they said moving cattle, I'm pretty sure it was the only person in their peer group that said that. And then I moved to Africa to do this refugee resettlement work with the State Department. But, I actually attribute that time and that their courage and the grace they gave me to go explore to actually finding my like deep calling and my passion. And I'm blessed that work is fun. Like Saturday, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, I'm happy.
Well, I think you're happy probably as a part of the formula that helps you to help people become our best selves.
Yeah.
And,
I think that's an interesting distinction. Yeah.
yeah, because, we say in our community, hurt people, right?
Yeah.
And we say happy people so I think that you being in that place is really connecting some kind of biological energy to the people you work with. And you don't just work in singular environments, you work with groups as well. How do you harness that so that each person you're touching into?
Oh, there's so many threads of great questions in there. I do think there's something to know yourself and to understand yourself and to be with yourself and to kind of feel the full range of emotions and have a wide range of lived experiences to know who you are. And I also think, I imagine you have the same experience talking to so many different types of folks on your podcast. The more people you interact with, the more experiences you have or patterns you recognize, the more opportunities there are to connect more deeply with different folks. So in your question, it's exposure and pattern recognition, but it's also almost, I would imagine, a listening inward to listen more deeply to others and be more present to others in the threads of conversations. Do you have that experience of listening deeply in conversations?
You're so right on that, and the answer is yes. In I think I know in one of my books, but perhaps in both of them, I share that one of the things people talk about, what are your superpowers, and I encourage people listening out loud. So often we're listening quietly while we're hearing the conversation we want to have, louder in our heads. But if we could truly just blank page it and listen out loud to what somebody else is saying, I think they, first of all, feel that. I think also you're able to create a conversation and a relationship that's going to be more revealing, which yields better outcome. Is that what you're asking me?
Yeah, I think it's giving your full presence to someone and listening deeply, which I think is so much harder now with all the technology and distractions and so many things happening in our world. And I like what you're saying about listening out loud to ourselves. You and I chatted a little bit about a book that I've been writing, and one of the things that I've been really noticing is that so many of us have, I would say, it's atrophied, like atrophied the skill to listen to ourselves, to listen to our inner
Mhm.
wisdom, to hear our own voices. So we absolutely need presence with other folks. And I think we deserve to give ourselves that same presence too, to listen inward as much as we listen outward.
We really do. And you mentioned a new book. I wanted you to talk about that. So would you please just jump right into it right now? And we're certainly going to share with people how they can get it because we just want to absorb everything you have to
I
give us.
appreciate that.
But can we cheat a little bit and you tell us about it right now?
Oh, I would love that. I would love that. You know, when you're like deep in the like final stages of finishing a book, it's like you're living and breathing it. Um, I had 2 kids, 2 books, and thought I was done. I was closed for business, no more books, no interest in writing. And this book kept on waking me up at 4 in the morning, and it kept on like knocking on the door. And it really came out of a season of a lot of death. I had 5 deaths in 5 months, and it was like it felt a little bit like whack-a-mole. And the first one was my nearest and dearest family member. Um, but what it actually gave me was this real um, it was almost as if it gave me permission to stop. I'd been running so hard and passionate about what I did, and I loved what I did, but I actually gave myself permission. And I realized that we often gloss over hard things. We gloss over things that are uncomfortable or messy or can't put a bow on it, can't understand it. And so when I actually had time and space to feel these hard feelings, I realized that tension creates consciousness. And if we can create tension, if we can hold tension, which is just what you were saying about the presence and that capacity to be fully present with someone, if we can hold that tension, we actually almost like a flower blossoming, which is causing our allergies. It's almost like that flower blossoms into a whole new set of possibility. And so it's I would never say the book is about grief because it'll never sell, and it's not just about selling, but it's really about understanding the full range of lived life experiences, the highs and the lows, to be that full version of yourself. Um, and so much of what we describe as shallowing, refusing to feel the hard things, means we don't feel the joy, and we start to live in this really narrow continuum, which is causing so much suffering individually, in families, in communities, in our nation, not to mention the loneliness epidemic and the burnout epidemic. And so I kind of tumbled into this. It wasn't again intended, but I'm really excited. It's called Living Real: Redefining Success, Presence, and Happiness. And it's really about thinking about how do you reclaim what that means for you, kind of putting aside all the shoulds, putting aside everything you've been told, and starting to listen more deeply and feel more deeply. It's been a really fun. It's been really fun.
I don't know when you started this book and when those deaths in a row were occurring for you. And death occurs in so many ways, not just from people, but from relationships, from experiences, from hopes and dreams. We feel like, oh my God, that's dead. Put a nail in it, or you say gloss over it. Uh, Two things though. One, when my older sister Sandy, the one I moved to California to vacation with and ended up staying on that location for over 50 years. Sandy passed and it was untimely. We didn't expect it and it was illness based. Um, Dr. Camille, I cocooned and I had a picture I loved of her just above the stairs down to my gym. And I stopped for a while going into the gym because I didn't want to go past the picture. Then I decided I'm going to take the picture down, you know, and maybe that would work. And my mom encouraged me not to remove the picture. She said, "You want to walk by that picture because for a while you're going to cry every time you see it and you'll be sad." She said, "But one day you're going to cry and it's going to be happy. It's going to be a memory or it's going to be a strength, that she shared with you, whatever. But you're going to get there. And then one day you're going to laugh." Kind of like we're talking, you mentioned the allergies and my eyes are tearing up, right? And I've got all these yellow roses outside. The gardener was here yesterday. But, and I didn't get allergies until I was over 60.
Yes,
But
that's the thing.
right? But all of that ties into, I think, what you're teaching us, whether it's the tears from the allergy, which is the payment for the beauty we're seeing, or the tears for the loss of my sister. I think your book is going to give us an ability to treat grief or death the way we need to treat it and not to have it so formulaic. Like by week 6, you need to get out and start
Like
running.
you're supposed to,
It won't be
exactly.
well for you.
I'm first of all, I'm sorry about Sandy's untimely passing. And um, one of the greatest gifts that in my life was the phone call when my father called to tell me that my grandmother had died.
Mm,
And he passed October 2012. Um, but he said, he shared that she had died, and he listened to me sob. I just moved back from Africa. I was just starting a doctorate. I was all alone. I didn't know anybody. And then after a couple minutes, he said, "Sweetie, I want you to feel how much your heart hurts. Just
mm,
like how much your
mm,
heart hurts with Sandy." He said, "Not many people know how to love that deeply, that
mm,
intensely, that
mm,
passionately." So that
mm,
heartache that you felt for Sandy is a
mm,
testament to how
mm,
much love you had for her. And it sounds
mm.
like you were able to metabolize that. And now I would imagine parts of her live on inside you. And
And
that
the
becomes,
pictures back up.
and the pictures back up. Fantastic.
Yeah,
Fantastic.
yeah,
The one
yeah.
other thing I would add to this conversation is that grief, when we think about grief, death is the easy gateway in because we've all lost someone, sadly. But there's so much grief, as you said, that's happening, whether it's ending relationships or AI changing the demand for you in the workplace, whether it's climate changes. There's so many things that are causing us to grieve, whether it's a health diagnosis, and as a culture, we don't know how to build a container to hold that. We don't know how to sit in the tension of, I loved Sandy, I'm missing Sandy. How do I hold both of those? And I think some really small shifts have this potential to really open us back up into the most full expression of who we are, the most beautiful expression of what we can bring forward in our lives. So I'm
True,
excited.
true, true. And it's so wonderful that you have people in your life who've helped you so that you can help us. I mean, you've got a very special relationship that you've had with your father. And I'm somebody who comes from a nurturing family. They shaped my values and
Yeah.
they continue to encourage me and to get me straight now and then, right?
Keep you on your toes.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So I'm curious, how did that upbringing influence your approach to life?
Oh, that's a great question. Incidentally, the first death that was really heartbreaking for me in this season of death was November 16th, 2023. And it was my dad's best friend and his brother who had no kids. So I was like his daughter. So it was kind of like the second father. um, I'm from the New England area, so we're kind of gritty. We act out love. We don't necessarily speak love. And I grew up in a family that was pretty close in age. We were all in high school together. I'm the youngest of three, all in high school together, all in college together. And so I kind of grew up in a pull yourself up by your bootstraps and keep up or get left behind kind of family, which maybe you could say I was a
Year
not so
two, year two.
that
Even when we
resonates.
didn't have straps, we had to pull up by our bootstraps.
Exactly. I remember seeing this basket and I said to my mom, I was like, what is this laundry basket? She's like, "Oh, that's what you slept in. I took you to work." I was like, fantastic. I was like, "Oh, thank goodness there was no rules." Um, I was probably three and a half before I realized that I was 3.5 years younger than my siblings. I just assumed if I could get ahead of the wave and kind of think proactively, I'd figure a way to keep up. And it's kept me scrappy, as I imagine it's kept you pretty scrappy.
Yeah, and that was a term that people used, or description people gave of me very often when I first started building my business, and I didn't know how I wanted to receive that because I was like, okay, but now I'm kind of proud of it. Yeah, because Scrappy works, doesn't it? It works
Well,
very.
you're polished and you're poised and you're professional and you're tenacious and gritty.
There you go.
All of
There
it.
you go. So you shared just a few minutes ago about how your dad encouraged you around the joy and the gift of being able to have loved so well that you would mourn someone passing. What other gems of wisdom do you think your father gave you that still reflect on today and apply well in your work?
Oh, that's a great question. Um, so my father was a middle school principal, and
Oh, the
that's
greatest.
that's saying it all.
Yeah.
Um, and he was interesting. For his stage and age in life, he was really innovative. He had a child psychiatrist come to him way, way, way back in time, and the child psychologist, whose name was Reese Vanderpool, was a Holocaust survivor.
Mhm.
And he said, listen, there are far too many kids in this town that need my services than I can provide services for. And my dad said, okay. And Reese said, so instead of treating the kids, I'm going to come treat you. And my dad said, okay. And so Reese met with my father half a day a month for 23 years. And Reese
Mm.
really helped my dad start to think about the systems that people operate in. And, there's a kid coming into the school, but what's happening in the family and what's happening in the neighborhood and what's happening in their body and how do they think holistically about that child, which is really what led me to do my doctorate in ecological psychology or systems psychology. And that's a lot of the work I do with the executives I work with, but also the teams. It's looking at the whole system. You might come and say, I want to deliver this, this, and this. I want to launch this project and drive these results. And I'm looking at the system that holds all of that. So I think it's like all one big puzzle, and I'm so curious about it. I love it. And for that, I'm so grateful of my father, who really bred that curiosity, and my mother, who was definitely around supporting a lot of his passion and his work.
That's just fantastic, And you referenced working with leaders and executives. How uh, talk about how you're helping leaders navigate modern challenges. And I know your book Rewired speaks to something affecting so many of us. We're all constantly connected, but rarely present. We hit on that a little bit a few minutes ago as well. Let's get into that in line with what your book teaches.
Sure. That book came out in 2011, and it was all about how we're living in this always on, always connected, overwired world, which is so commonplace now. But back then, no one was thinking about it. No one was realizing kind of the neurological consequences of being always on. And I actually came to leadership development.
Which are those
Uh,
consequences, or
I mean,
can include.
they're massive. I think the first and foremost is the adrenaline and cortisol fatigue. We are living in what I've come to define as an activated state. We feel productive, we feel like we're getting a lot done, but we're overlooking kind of the adrenal fatigue that's happening in our system. And the new book speaks to this at length. We also have a resource we can put in the show notes about um, cortisol and adrenaline fatigue.
So the new book speaks to this.
So the new book speaks to this. And what we try to differentiate for folks is this idea that there's an activated state, which is where we're agitated, feeling that stress, feeling that cortisol. We might think we're productive and we might be driving results, but it comes with a cost. And the thing that will often move people into action most quickly around this is if they look at their waistline and they see a couple pounds around their waist. That is often an indicator of excessive cortisol. What we are working towards in both Rewired, but we really delve into in the new book, Living Real, is this idea of how do you design a life where you're enlivened, where you are on purpose, doing work that excites you, but you're doing it in a sourced way where you're feeling energy come through you rather than a forced way, like back up against a wall, a deadline pushing, push, push, push. So this enlivened way of living is really, I think, what we need to be moving towards. And that means pushing against the stimulus of the technology. It means pushing against the kind of rewards that the workplace give us for being responsive within 30 seconds. It means pushing against the um, neurochemicals, the dopamine that we feel when we scroll through Twitter or X and all those different areas. Is
Well,
that
what made you tackle this particular issue? I mean, you said, okay, we can look, and if we see a few extra inches around the waist, that's an indicator. Were you looking at people you were working with and going, okay, I need to talk to them about this?
Oh, I love it. No, that is not how I typically engage. I share that one because that's one that actually mobilizes people. People often know when they're living with adrenaline. I'll just go back in time. I actually finished my doctorate, went to Capitol Hill, went to work with a nonprofit of police chiefs, police executives from large jurisdictions. And my first day on the job was 9/11, which is a very unique way to meet your colleagues, but it's also the day that law enforcement changed from hometown security to homeland security. And I came across this the all the neurological, the health consequences associated with cortisol because police were chilling out, hanging out, and then all of a sudden they went into this intense call. And so there was a lot of research in that in 2000 about this adrenaline fatigue in police executives. We're now seeing that commonplace, and we all see this. Sometimes it manifests as people having significant health issues as soon as they stop working, like they hit retirement, and then all of a sudden the adrenal fatigue steps back and they're overcome. It shows up with people being so driven at work that they miss those biofeedback moments where their body's telling them. It's where they're so passionate about something that they're doing that they're not sleeping sustainably, they're not taking care of their health, they're not hydrating. And living real is all about how do you put all those things back into alignment? Again, that enlivened, sustainable way of doing it. And giving people some really tactical tools because we're not often taught how to create a container. We're not often taught how to find our passion. We're not often taught how to listen inward, which again goes back to my dear old dad. Yeah.
I love the title "Living Real." So excited for the book to hit, well, Amazon, uh, and when we think about it, for people who are watching television or even, however they consume information, um, reality TV, even the reality show folk tell you it's anything but reality, right? We're here for your entertainment. It does, though, I think, escape often for people that it is just that entertainment and that reality TV isn't real. So I think your book, titled that way, is so important at this moment in how we're consuming information and how we're allowing that to penetrate our lives and our consciousness. And I'm really grateful that you're writing it. I want you to make sure that you sign my copy.
Yes, yes,
Okay.
yes, yes. And you hit on something that is so true. We can fall into these illusions of like, oh, the Joneses are doing all of this, or Susie has this perfect Insta real life. And we can lose track of what that again, life is about the full range, the highs and the lows, like the
Yeah.
love you shared with Sandy and the heartache, right?
And everything doesn't have to be ultra as well,
Yeah.
loud, big, long, sometimes quiet, quick, and thoughtful.
And that little moment where you snuggle your grandchild and
Yeah,
that moment
yeah,
where you see a photo that just warms your heart. Or
So
celebrate the roses that are making you sneeze.
yeah. And I mean, I've even got them behind me. You can't see them, but there's some.
Again.
Some right there,
Beautiful.
because I have beautiful, beautiful yellow roses, and my house is like surrounded by them and fruit. So years ago, I was on the road a lot, as I am now, Dr. Camille,
Mm,
and I would always have yellow roses because sunshine is my favorite color.
I love
Yellow roses delivered to my home. And my husband was like, "Do you realize what we're paying for these roses?" And I was thinking of it as a gift of my work, right? I can afford to have roses
yeah,
brought
and
in.
it brings me that joy.
Yeah, well, came home from an extended work travel, and my house was torn up in front. And I'm like, "What's going on here?" And he said, "Oh, we had something going on underground. We had to work on it." So I bought that. I was okay because, and the people were going to be coming back when I took my next trip 2 weeks later. I took the next trip 2 weeks later, came back, and I had a front full of rose bushes all around my house, nothing but yellow roses. They bloom all year. So he figured out which ones, so I could have
Staggered.
cuttings
Oh,
all the time. And I have kumquats and oranges around the bedroom side,
oh
right?
my goodness.
All
That sounds
planted
amazing.
here. And oh girl, he went crazy with it later. I think we've got maybe over 100 fruit trees now. But here's what I'm telling
No
you.
podcast.
I thought he was doing it from love and joy because I love roses. He
Uh-huh.
said, no, it was just going to be cheaper for me to be able to cut my own roses all year.
Maybe it's a both and. Maybe it's a both and.
And so I still have that gift. So when I get a little sneezy these last couple of years from them, because my husband transitioned during COVID, not of COVID, he had Alzheimer's. Um, I think of him and I'm like, okay, that's when I was saying how those tears can be happy sometimes. So this new allergy to my roses, I just look at it as him sending me a kiss.
Yeah. See, that's a beautiful reframe, right? It's celebrating the highs and the lows, the sneeze and the
Yeah,
memory. What
yeah,
a
yeah,
beautiful
yeah.
story of his love.
Oh, but
Yes.
girl, you should know him, honey. He was saving money. Uh, but
It's a good Yankee. Yeah.
Dr. Camille, though, I do want you to walk us, please, through what surprised you most about how technology affects our brains and bodies with the work you did do in it, especially since you've got the new book coming out.
Oh, thank you for bringing us back. So I actually boiled it down into kind of a very simple way of thinking about it. You are on. So you can think of two quadrants: doing, doing, doing. You're like, go, 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 or you're done, where you're when you're on technology. If you can identify those and then carve out time where you unplug, where you step back, where you're away from the stimulus, and it doesn't necessarily have to be a long period of time, but if you unplug, it's almost like the neurochemicals can drain from your brain and you can do a reset and then you can come back rewired thinking
So
in
you broke it into four parts.
also links to the stress that we're having in our system. It also links to the level of activity. It also links to the neurochemicals that are surging through our brain. And some of the productivity is actually can create good neurochemicals. You as we got on, you were holding your grandbaby. You were actually filling your body with oxytocin and good neurochemicals, filling that up, which is a nice way of actually letting the stress hormones step away and opening into the hormones that you do want, the productive ones.
Oh, and it was so wonderful to be able to share him with you for that brief moment. Um, Now, which unwiring strategy do you find that most people are resisting at first and then, naturally come around to not being able to believe they ever lived without it?
I mean, when I came out with a book and I suggested that people put their phone away, people would rather give up sex for the rest of their life than give up their phone. Yes, we are so addicted to our phones. It gives us this illusion of connection, illusion of connection. It gives us a sense of security, but it actually detaches us from what matters most. It detaches us from those deep, genuine engagements. It detaches us from having those real relationships, which create the memories you have with your husband and your late sister.
Camille, listen. So I know that the techiness of our world today is often blamed for the tackiness of it, okay, and of our lives. But is this really fair? Because phones also are like security devices. They're not just the games we play or the games we play, and you know, I mean, they really have become vehicles to just about every part of how we live. So is it necessary to put it away, or is it as good or acceptable to learn how to have it present?
I think it's both and. I mean, technology is fabulous in the sense that, you can say, Siri, set a timer for X amount and it's done. It's a
Or
great
like my mom, who lived on her own for a lot of years, as an elderly woman, and we told her, keep your phone with
close
you,
to you.
just lay it right there, but you can do what you need to do and have it charging and beside you at night, because we wanted her to be able to have it as a security device if she
It is
needed.
absolutely. I am. It's funny. My uncle who passed away, he always used to give me a hard time when I would have my phone close to me. I love taking pictures. I love taking pictures of my kids. I love being able to look something up. They're not inherently bad. They become challenging when they supplant relationships, when they supplant our way of engaging.
When you're at dinner with four people and your head is
Yeah,
down.
and you're like, yes. Um, I think technology is inherently good. I think where it gets dangerous is when you are constantly comparing your success. We often compare our blooper reel, all the things that we don't want people to see, with everybody else's highlight reel,
Mhm,
their
mhm.
successes. And that's where it becomes detrimental. It's learning how to use technology. I have a good friend who started 2019. He shocked me. He took over a business that was camper vans, like rental camper vans. And turns out that was a really good business to go into before COVID. But what he recently posted that the thing people like the most is finding cabins that have no cell phone connectivity, right?
Mm.
Or they don't have Wi-Fi. They can make a call, but they don't have Wi-Fi. So people are seeking out ways to create a boundary. And so, per your earlier question, I see people logging out of apps. I see people closing functionality. So they'll keep their phone, they'll keep their text messages, but they'll make choices to kind of create a barrier to help them make better choices. And it's a whole new thing with kids. I've got a 9 and an 11-year-old, and it's a lot for them and their young brains to learn how to make good choices. So, um,
Do you think that there are some signals or warning signs that help us as family members to support others or ourselves before we cross the line of being too, having technology become too toxic in our lives?
one of the things that I love about the book is we talk about what we call reeling. Like, how do you get
Mhm.
real with people? I would say have real relationships and invite people to call you on it. Like, if we go out
Mm.
to dinner, hey, I notice you're still back at work, or so that's one thing.
Well, you
Um,
got to tap people on the shoulder and say they're trying to pick up the salad.
yeah, exactly, exactly. So I think those real relationships. I think there's an app on iPhones which tells you your phone usage, and I think that's really helpful. I think for some, I'm not a developmental psychologist, but for some families, they're buying this technology that just closes off Wi-Fi, just takes those choices off the table. Just like I don't buy ice cream because I don't have a lot of boundaries with ice cream. Kids
I
need
knew
to
you were
learn
my girl.
boundaries.
I knew you were my girl. Oh my
I love
God.
ice cream.
Look at us. Look at us saming each other. But your work covers so many areas. I mean, you help people get into flow state, face fears, and so much more. Do you mind talking a little bit about mastering the powers of female leadership? And
Oh,
we're,
that's a
we're living we're living in a day in this country where people sometimes confuse DE and I and the new executive orders around that with the ability to talk about it and not talk about it as a segregated political conversation. So
Absolutely.
that's what I'm asking for. Just talk about, I mean, because you built a company in a male dominated world, and it's clear that women do bring something different to the table. I'm interested in you sharing what strengths women leaders often miss in ourselves, and
Mhm.
some simple shifts that can help us turn our natural abilities into our superpowers. We referenced superpowers
I
earlier.
love that. I love that. Um, not politically correct, but if you just go back in time, for so long, women tried to argue that we were equal and the same and exactly like men. And I think what we've really come to realize is that men and women are fundamentally, we are neurologically wired differently. Our brains operate in different ways. And so, what this means is that if you and I were to have a stroke, we would probably recover much more quickly and much more, we'd have better odds than a man with the same stroke because our brains are structured where there's a lot more connection between the right and left brain. So, what this looks like in a business meeting is someone raises a topic and women have to think about it. They're going to this part of their brain and this part of their brain and this part of their brain, and they're pulling together all the data on that particular issue. They might look slow, and when they go to this part of the brain, they bump into some information. And then this part of the brain, they bump into different information. And so they come forward in the meeting and they ask questions. Well, when we did this, I'm curious what the implications were here. And when we did it this way, I'm curious about the implications here. And so they're perceived as not decisive, distracting us from the kind of drive towards making a conclusion. But when you look at over time, women tend to make better decisions that are more lasting because they're more thorough and they think in a more holistic way. And so bringing women into business decisions is vital. The research is incredibly clear that women help support better decision making. For women, we need to start to look at ways that we might have dulled ourselves and
Mhm.
kind of put a lampshade on what makes us unique to fit into the typical masculine corporate world.
Certainly, I've done that. As you're talking, I'm thinking, Doctor, about even incidents along my journey where maybe it wasn't required of me to behave that way, but because I've had enough experiences where I thought it was required, I defaulted to those behaviors, like texting the white male in my group what to say next or what to ask next rather than put it forward myself. Maybe I discredited the people I was present to by thinking that they wouldn't have heard it from me. And that's a small example,
But it's a
but
great example.
it's a big thing that I think a lot of women have done where we brought our experiences into a room, the good and the bad of it.
And so, I hear you say that, and I hear you saying, I was really clear on the outcome, what I needed to achieve, and I was flexible on the approach, which is
Mm-hmm,
what women are really, really good at.
mm-hmm,
Clear on the outcome, flexible on the approach.
mm-hmm.
And you got the outcome by feeding it to the white man who could raise the question.
Who, by
And
the way, is a lovely white man still in my company, and we've laughed about it sometimes. And he's even threatened me a couple of times. He did. He said, I'm leaving my phone in the car." Like, speak up. You're the one who gotta.
oh, I
So
love
it's
that. What a
yeah.
great alliance, though. He's saying your voice matters, and you can say
Well,
that.
we work really well together in the core executive team, and he's such a lovely person. We fit our roles to the environment.
But what you're saying is beautiful. You asked about how can women step up and own and step into these roles more effectively. I think it's about building strategic alliances like that. And actually that's a great example of a real relationship. He's like, you don't need to text me the end. You can say it, right? That's a genuine connection. What happens so often is a woman will say something and 5, 10 minutes later, a man will say the same thing, and everybody will be like, Joe, that's a great idea. When your white male colleagues say, I'm so glad that Joe brought back up this point that you made because it was spot on. And I'm sorry I missed it the first time. Thank you for bringing that. Is there more? Like in bringing that recognition back. But those strategic alliances is one thing. I think women can start to take up more space. And women tend to walk like men say, well, how do we balance the playing field? Well, it's more like a balance beam for women. And we're pretty darn skilled at it. So
Mhm.
we have the opportunity to kind of claim some of those.
How we approach it, the matters so much, because if we approach it from a perspective where so there's blame in this formula, I think it doesn't work well. I think that oftentimes, I think if we approach it from we are evolving
Yes.
as a society, as a culture, whether it be a nation or a world. And so we're at a shift point, you
Right.
know, where we can appreciate each other without blaming one or the other. I think it makes it a healthier outcome. And isn't that what we're going for?
Yeah.
I mean, does that any of that make sense
Oh,
to you?
it's so true. And I think you could take that forward into where we are as a nation. We need to move beyond blame and we need to be able to say, what is it we want to create? What is the outcome we're moving towards as a nation? And how do we come together to work towards that? Because finger pointing is definitely
And recognize where we have differences and where those differences are strengths. We do it in healthy families, you know, all the time. So I think if we can start to bring some family back to the nation, it will be lovely. But that's not the conversation we came to have. I'm so happy that we're able to talk about what we want to. Before we leave this particular topic, though, there was another question I had.
yeah.
And Dr. Camille, when you're coaching women leaders, have you noticed that any of the companies you work with sometimes reward certain leadership styles over others? Most of us have learned to adapt. We talked about that, right? But
Yeah.
adapting doesn't always mean thriving. Can you talk with us about how to make sure we don't blur the lines and yet we don't draw a hard line either?
Yeah. All of these things, I'm going to kind of pull a couple threads back when we're operating from that stress and cortisol and we're dialed into technology and we're moving really fast, we don't get that altitude, that perspective to kind of know ourselves, to listen to that inner wisdom, to bring that forward. And so it's I'm very cautious in saying this because women are juggling a lot of balls and often at a pivot point professionally as they're raising families and as they're, supporting some of their elder generation. So their plates are full. The most important thing I urge all leaders to do is find those still points, find those places where they can step back. And I will confess, mine is between like 3 and 5 in the morning because
Yeah.
that's when I know I can reliably have that time. But whether it's running or meditating or finding that place where you could actually listen inward, because when we're still, we often know where our strengths are and we can start to leverage those even more fully.
I so appreciate that. How do we get to stay true to ourselves as individuals while navigating boardrooms that may not have been designed necessarily with our strengths in mind? Or, I'm talking about anyone. How do we navigate that?
I need to get you this book. I'm so excited to share this with you. One of the things that we started on is this idea of tension creates consciousness, but our lives are so full, it's hard to hold the tension. And so I think it's often starts with creating a container or the structures that help you navigate. And so,
Say that again. Say that again.
um,
Creating a container.
yeah, so the easiest way to think about this is if you can imagine kids on a playground and there's busy roads on all sides of the playground, the kids cluster in the middle of the playground. They're scared to go to the edges because there's no protection and there's cars and there's a lot happening. But when you build a fence, then the kids spread out and they use the whole playground. The question is, how do we build the fences that we need, create the structures that we need in our lives to be the best versions of ourselves? And so
Without
often
creating walls.
correct, correct. And so an example is like, if I bought other people's definitions of what success is and I bought other people's definitions of what makes me happy, I'm going to be running hard towards that, but not necessarily true to myself versus saying, gosh, what is it you really love? Like, I am so blessed. I remember when my sister was pregnant with my niece, who was just graduating from college. I said, I want to do work I love from places I love with people I enjoy. And I said, I'd say people I love, but HR gets wonky on that. And I had the courage to create a life that has that. So I think there's lots of ways we can create that structure, and it can be really pedantic, like putting your car keys where they need to go every time. So it's a structure you can find them, to thinking about how you build fitness or soul time into your work, and starting to think about how you build time for the people that really nourish and nurture you. I just think we've been going so fast towards other people's definitions of success rather than our own, that we haven't been present to who we are and what we need and what is going to make us really happy. And I think all of that's a big thing. So let's start with the first couple things, which is, what do you need to be the best version of yourself? Maybe it's organizing your closet in a certain way. Maybe it's having certain foods in your um, fridge so you can eat healthy. Maybe it's hydrating in a certain way. Maybe it's an alarm that goes off so you can sleep in a certain way. But there's all these small changes that create the structure that's like the foundation of you being the best version of yourself, whether that's personally or professionally in your workplace.
I'm racing through my head on what you're saying because there are some things I've been thinking I needed to do that you just messaged to me. So if nobody else gets anything out of this conversation, trust me,
Thank you.
this is a highlight moment for me.
Thank you.
Um, we've covered
And can
some
I just throw
important
out one more nugget? When you
topics.
get clear on that and you start to put some fences, you're probably going to piss some people off. You're going to disappoint people, right? And that's going to
Oh,
create tension, which is going to create new levels of consciousness, because you're going to be like, nope, this is really important to me. I'm going to choose this, and there's going to create that tension, and then you're off to the races. There goes
my
there.
third grade teacher wrote in her notes during report season to my parents that Janice is a ray of sunshine in the room. However, she becomes a dark cloud whenever anybody else is not happy. Like, I always want to keep people happy. Now you're saying in order to create my happiness, I'm going to be pissing people off. I'll let you know how that goes.
Yeah, yeah, free session. We'll have a conversation. But I also, I would, first of all, I like that resonates really deeply. Like wanting to make sure other people are cared for and loved, and like I'm
And
guessing
crying when they're not.
you feel people deeply just in this conversation. I can feel that.
Mm.
And when like that learning edge is to start to notice when you disappoint someone, like holding that, but then also holding what gets created in you, because somewhere in there you're listening more deeply to what you need. And in listening to what you need and serving that need, you'll probably be able to serve a lot more people, even more than you're already doing, which is magnificent.
Maybe I'll do like my mom, do as my mom did. My mom would always, whenever she thought something was going to bring us grief or, strife or any negative reaction, tell us up front, listen, I'm not assuming you're going to be sad about this. In case you are, here's why we're doing this, or in case you are, here's what she would always like frame it for us, kind of like put a mattress down,
Here's
before
what we're
we,
doing and why you're doing it and why it's good for you. That's great.
yeah,
What a
yeah,
special
yeah.
woman.
We all stay kids, don't we? That inner child. Mm.
Yeah.
We talked about some really good stuff. Okay. We talked about technology. We talked about balance. We talked about female relationships. What messages do you want to make sure you leave our family listening right now with?
Oh, that's a great question. There's so many things that we could say, but I think the thing that we all need to hear so much is permission to let go of all the shoulds and to listen to what it is that we want and what we know. And when we become more real with ourselves and when we listen inward in that way, we just open up this capacity to serve in a much more holistic, impactful way. And yet it's interesting. Every time we get onto the plane, we hear put on your own oxygen mask before, and yet we don't do that in our lives. And so I guess one of the things we're excited to do is we're just going to create a tag of reeling where we tag when people are being real, when they're being true to their inner selves, and what's possible when that happens. When we start to speak our truth and we start to engage, I think you're going to start to see loneliness plummet because people are going to be like, yeah, this thing happened to me and it was really hard. And people are going to be like, oh, it's not fantastic that it happened, but gosh, I've been going through that. And it's going to start to build these bridges, and it's going to start to open people up in a way that we've kind of lost from when we knew our neighbors and we were interwoven and we were more
Mhm.
less geographically mobile,
Yeah,
more
yeah. Wow.
connected.
I'm grateful for that.
Yeah.
Thank you. You want to go 4 for 4?
I'll do 4 for 4. Although I have to confess, I was thinking about this morning, and I was not thrilled with all the people I came up with my pat from my who I would invite to a dinner party. And so I did something with technology. I said, I I said, GPT, based on what you know about me, who do you think I should invite to a dinner party? And I was pretty impressed with what GPT said. In fact, it came up with one of my good friends of Esther Perel. And so I sent her a text message saying, hey, GPT thinks that we need to get together. Let's put something on the calendar. So I thought that was kind of fun. But yes, let's do 4 for 4.
Well, thank you, GPT. Got you ready, girl. And that is the first question, as you smart student anticipate. You get to, so I ask you 4 questions, you give me 4 answers, and there are no wrong answers. We do ask, though, when you invite 4 people to dinner, which is the first question, who will they be? It's your dinner party. They be real people, you
Yes.
know?
And they
Okay.
couldn't be my future grandchildren, which I was also like, that would be a cool thing to, because my kids are 9 and 11. They don't have kids. So it's not going to surprise you. The first person that came up was my dad. So much has happened since he passed. And God, I would love to have dinner with him. I'd love to take a walk. I would love to sit on the porch in a rocking chair with him. So that was one.
Have you ever heard Luther? Do you know who Luther Vandross is?
No,
Or
I
was?
don't.
Okay, so he was a really popular singer. Look him up. Vandross.
Okay.
Luther
I'll look him up. Yeah.
Vandross. He has a song, Dance with My Father. We've been theming around tears, happy tears and
Yeah.
sad tears. So get your Kleenex ready.
Yeah.
If you have a moment after we finish this, I encourage you to go ahead and listen to him while you're in this moment, Doctor.
Oh.
And you're welcome.
No, I can't wait. I will look forward to that.
Mhm.
Um, so I will also say I thought that GPT's suggestion of Esther Perel was a great one. I also have been kind of fascinated with Ariana Huffington right now. She's just evolved so much, and I feel like she's listened inward to what matters, and she's pivoted, and she's embracing her passion, which is really around health and her technology, to see how can she serve at a new level. So I'm curious about that. Um, I would also say RBG, Ruth Bader Ginsburg. I would, such a woman of character and tenacity and wisdom. And I feel like that would just be an incredible way to learn a
And
history.
your dad's going to be at the table with some fascinating women,
I forgot they're all
including
going to be
you.
there.
Including you. Okay. He's going to be really happy about that. Well done. Tea. Okay, so now you know then that I'm asking you what 4 pieces of music or artists you're listening to and not podcasts.
Oh, that's great. No, that was a good um well, it's funny. I took it as music. And so I actually I did look at my Spotify, and I was a little surprised because I share it with my kids. So
Yeah.
I've been listening to a lot of Imagine Dragons and Descendants, which is not necessarily my choice of music.
Again, you're welcome. You get to see what they're
um, One of the things I also noticed was that I have been listening to a lot of Enya, which is not something that would normally pick up. But what I realized was that Enya was a tool that I used when I was fresh out of grad school to focus in a noisy environment. And so as I've been focusing in different environments, I will often put on this music and it's almost like a ballast, like an anchor. It's like a container that helps me lean into that. So that was another one. And then I have to say, Ivy Ross and Susan Magnuson's book, Your Brain on Art, it is such a, it's almost like a meditation. I don't, have you read that book? I listened to
No, 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 no.
Oh, the thing they say is that just like sitting's the new smoking, they say in 15 years we are gonna we are gonna mandate 20 minutes of art every day because it's so good for your brain, it's so good for your well-being, whether you're creating art or enjoying art or experiencing art. So sitting was the new smoking and art is the new exercise.
Oh,
Yeah, that's
wow.
great. Yeah, 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 yeah.
Oh,
How am I doing? I'm 4 for 4 or two
yeah.
for four.
2 for 4, 2 for 4. We're going 3 for 4 now. You know that's books. Okay, so what are you recommending to our family that they read?
Oh,
Why and why?
so I will say Your Brain on Art is one of the best books I have read in a couple years. And it's it's captivating, it's relevant, it applies to business, it's uplifting, it's scientific, it has all those pieces. It's really phenomenal. Um, Infectious Generosity, I think, is another really good book. And I'd have to pull the author's name, but it is this idea that bad travels really quickly, and so we need to be intentional and over index, and we need to put our attention towards good things and good acts of kindness and good opportunities. And I'll tell a quick story. Um, a friend of mine is a pastor in New York, and one day they came into their church, and there was someone sleeping in the pews, and they hadn't locked the church. They, moved the person along, but then they went and looked at the camera, and that person had come in, had gone up to the altar and had lit a candle, and then proceeded to sweep the entire church before they laid down. And so she's like, this is goodness. We need to spread this. We need to share these moments, these light bulbs of hope and possibility and goodness, because we need generosity to be infectious. Now, that's a really easy offer. Um, Wild Edge of Sorrow,
Generosity. We'll get the
infectious
author.
generosity. Yeah. Another book that I love is Wild Edge of Sorrow, and it was really my first invitation into um, seeing sorrow as a gift. And I just think a lot of people are experiencing a lot of sorrow right now, so it's a very broad way of thinking about that. So that's a great book. And then David White's new book, Consolations,
Mhm.
too, is also great. And when I was thinking about the books, I wanted a little bit of a different flavor, right? Just like you don't want to eat the same thing.
Right,
Every
right,
day
right.
you want to have a little taste of something different. And books are so important now in a flash in the pan podcast kind of quick fix. I think books are really they're an invitation. They're an
I
invocation.
love books so much. When I was growing up, we didn't have a library on my side of town because I grew up in a segregated community. And one of the scariest things I did was cross town to go to the white library. Um, and we didn't have internet. We didn't have any of these devices to be able to download. So books were things that you opened, and I treasured them. I loved how they smelled. I loved how they felt. I wished that I could write notes to people in them, but they were public books, although
Oh, that's right.
I do write notes in my own mini book. So whenever whoever looks at them later, a guy came here to interview me for Forbes years ago, and he commented, "I can't believe you have so many books. I don't have a single room in my house that doesn't have a book in it, including bathrooms." In any event, I loved books so much. So today, when I order a book on Kindle, if I truly enjoy that book, I still will read it on Kindle, but buy it in homage to the author and put it on my shelf in hardback. You're there.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Thank
You're
you.
there.
That's a great tribute. And also what an amazing home you must have. for people to wander around and like pull a book at different points in time. It's for
Yeah, he was pretty shocked when he saw how many books are here. Now, with all the fires that recently were going on in California, because I'm referencing all my homes are full of books, but the one he came to was in California. I actually have friends who were like, "Did you get your books out? Did you get your books out?" No, I love them. I pray they're around for someone. I'm going to let life take its course on them, though. And you're really teaching us a great course in life today. So I can hardly wait
well, we're
for
so
the
blessed by the
for
people
four
we've
for
met.
four.
Oh.
4 for 4. You
All
know
right.
what that is. You know what that is,
Yep.
doctor.
Yep. I know that last one.
What four
Um,
pieces of advice will you give in case there are new family members here?
I
What
like it.
what 4 pieces of advice will you give to the family for living today and why? If it's advice that was given you, please pay homage to the author.
Fantastic. That was going to be my first question. So, one of my dear friends, Victoria Maisie, who was the founding executive director of Andy Weil Center, taught me about primal relationships, those relationships that feed your soul. And they're not the person next door necessarily, the person you see really regularly, those people that just ignite. So, my first invitation was identify those primal relationships and invest in them, like nurture them and like treat them like the precious gems that they are because the power there is phenomenal. Ivy Ross is also a very dear friend, but that's another example of something I held very, very dear. And that relationship has just unfolded beautifully over time. So now that wasn't on my list. Okay. So now I'm going to have to cut something out. Another person I've studied with a lot, Anne Marie Chiasson, she's also a doctor, um, has said, she often asks, what's right about that? And especially when we're having really hard times and we're going through hard things, forcing yourself to say, what's right about that? Like nothing could feel right in the moment, but opening that door of possibility is a great way that you get altitude, you think differently, you approach it from a different angle. So that's one of my favorites. She also says something that's interesting. So we all get triggered, we all get our buttons pushed, we all sometimes aren't the best version of ourselves. And she says, anytime you point a finger, one finger goes out, 3 fingers go back. And it's like, what is happening in me? And that is like, man, that's enough to stop you in your tracks and look in the mirror and talk about tension. That's going to create a lot of tension.
Right.
See that. All right. So what's the last one that I would pick from my list over here?
I bet that's an awesome list.
It was fun. It was kind of like after I listened to some of your podcasts, I was like, whoa, I'm going to create some of these lists. I think the thing I would encourage people to do is create, when we get triggered or activated or something happens, is to create that space to explore what's underneath it. What's happening here? What else is going on? What's behind that? And oftentimes that's like a door, like it's like a hidden door into you. It's a gateway into your shadow, but it's also a gateway into knowing yourself. Not always easy, not necessarily always fun, but often the more we can illuminate within ourselves, the more gravitas and ballast and capacity to be real with people that we're blessed to interact with. So, all right, 4 for 4. There we go.
That's fantastic. Thank you.
What a
Thank you.
pleasure. This is so
Did you
fun.
have fun? Did you have fun?
Oh, I'm envious of your days, your worlds, and your roses, and your
Oh,
grandbabies. Such a pleasure.
thank you, Dr. Camille, from my heart to your home. Thank you.
Such a pleasure. Thank you.